If you settle into your seat on a Sunday afternoon, coffee on the table, remote in hand, and start talking Cowboys football with friends, this is exactly the kind of conversation that naturally takes over the room. Not because it's flashy or headline-driven, but because it speaks directly to how Dallas is thinking, how they're diagnosing their problems, and what kind of football identity they're trying to build next. The Dallas Cowboys are not rushing their defensive coordinator hire, and that patience alone tells us this is not a symbolic move or a box-checking exercise. This is a philosophical decision, and if you look closely at the candidates they're interviewing, the message is loud, clear, and intentional. Dallas is letting the process breathe. Some of the candidates are still deep in the postseason. Others are navigating head coaching interviews elsewhere. And one of the most intriguing names linked to the job, Jim Leonhard of the Denver Broncos, is still competing in the NFL playoffs. That alone explains the timeline. But while fans wait for the final announcement, the Cowboys have already shown us what they value. Because patterns always reveal priorities in the NFL. And the pattern here is unmistakable. This search is about fixing the secondary. Out of the 8 known candidates connected to the Cowboys' defensive coordinator search so far, 5 come from defensive backs coaching backgrounds. That is not coincidence. That is strategy. Even more telling, among the 6 candidates without prior NFL coordinator experience, 4 are defensive backs coaches, and 3 of those currently serve as passing game coordinators. That detail matters. In today's NFL, the passing game is not just an offensive concept. It dictates how defenses are structured, how they practice, and how they survive. Teams that fail to adapt there get exposed, especially in January. The exceptions to this trend help reinforce the point rather than weaken it. Aaron Whitecotton, the in-house candidate, coaches the defensive line. Charlie Bowen, the Giants linebackers coach, served as interim defensive coordinator in 2025, giving him a unique resume. And Jonathan Gannon, the only former NFL head coach on the list so far, made his name in the league by coaching defensive backs in Minnesota and Indianapolis. Before climbing the ladder, even when Dallas looks outside the DB room, they're still gravitating toward coaches whose core understanding is rooted in pass defense. This shift represents a noticeable evolution in how the Cowboys approach coordinator hires. In previous years, Dallas leaned heavily toward former head coaches, betting on experience, authority, and organizational familiarity. This time, the search appears to be driven more directly by head coach Brian Schottenheimer, and it reflects a modern NFL truth. You don't stop today's offenses with reputation or resume length. You stop them with coverage intelligence, communication, adaptability, and player development on the back end. Hiring passing game coordinators and defensive backs coaches into top defensive roles has become increasingly common across the league. It's not a trend, it's a response to reality. Quarterbacks are more prepared than ever, offensive systems are more diverse, motion-heavy, and matchup-focused. Roles favor receivers. If your secondary can't communicate, disguise, and tackle in space, nothing else matters. Pressure up front means very little if the ball is out into seconds against soft or confused coverage. That's where this Cowboys search becomes especially interesting, because it aligns perfectly with their most glaring weakness. Dallas does not have a secondary problem because of scheme alone. They have a personnel problem, too. Darren Bland is the best cornerback on the roster, but he's coming off his second foot surgery in as many years. That's not nothing. Availability matters. Shaven Revel Jr. showed flashes as a rookie, but also struggled with consistency, which is exactly what you'd expect from a young defensive back thrown into meaningful snaps. The hope is that a full offseason helps him take the next step. But hope is not a plan, and going into the 2026 offseason, he remains a projection rather than a certainty. At safety, the picture is even murkier. There is no clear long-term answer. No proven stabilizer on the back end who erases mistakes or dictates coverage calls. That puts enormous pressure on the defensive coordinator, because safeties are often the quarterbacks of the defense. They control leverage, depth, rotations, and adjustments. If that position is unsettled, the entire structure becomes fragile. Here's where the search becomes more than just a coaching decision. For the right candidate, this job is also an opportunity. The Cowboys have a history of giving new defensive coordinators significant influence in shaping the roster during their first year. That includes input on free agent signings and defensive priorities. Even if the budget isn't limitless, there are real vacancies across Dallas defense, especially in the secondary. And a coach with a DB background can walk into this role knowing they'll have a chance to build something in their image. That's a powerful selling point. A defensive backs coach stepping into a coordinator role doesn't just want authority on Sundays. They want the chance to develop players, to identify traits they value, to install coverage concepts that match the personnel rather than force square pegs into round holes. Dallas can offer that, not total freedom, but enough influence to attract ambitious, forward-thinking coaches who believe they can elevate both scheme and talent. Now, it's important to keep perspective. This does not guarantee the Cowboys will hire a defensive back specialist. Searches evolve, new names emerge, interviews shift opinions, but so far, the direction is clear enough to matter. Dallas is telling us that stopping the pass is priority number one, and they are willing to invest intellectual capital, not just draft picks, into solving that problem. From a Sunday preview mindset, this is exactly the kind of behind-the-scenes storyline that shapes what we'll see on the field months from now. Defensive coordinator hires don't trend on social media like trades or draft picks, but they quietly define seasons. They influence how rookies are developed, how veterans are used, how game plans are built, and how adjustments are made when things go wrong. If Dallas gets this hire right, it could stabilize a defense that has been good but inconsistent, talented but vulnerable in the moments that matter most. And that's why this conversation matters. It's not about speculation for the sake of it. It's about understanding how teams think, how problems are identified, and how solutions are pursued in the modern NFL. The Cowboys aren't being subtle, and they don't need to be. They know where they've been exposed. They know what the league demands, and they're acting accordingly. So kick back, think it through, and talk it out like you would on a Sunday afternoon. Do you want a young DB-minded coordinator who grows with the roster, or a proven name who brings instant authority? Does scheme trump experience, or does experience still matter most when the pressure rises? Drop your thoughts, join the discussion, and stick with the channel, because this is where consistent, thoughtful football conversations live all season long.